if AI falls into the answer that you give to this question, right, for my company to exist, you have to define what my company is, which isn't easy, but okay. Yeah. For my company to exist in 10 years, AI needs to be part of the picture. Okay, now you have a strategic assertion.
With you.
And by the way, this is not necessarily true for every company.
Hi, this is your project management cowboy coming back to you with episode number 52. We're going to be talking about AI. This is a whole series on AI that we've been planning. It's funny because I'm not really an AI expert, but it's a reoccurring topic, not just in your lives, but also in my life, in project management, also in your life, Max. Some of you will recognize our guest, Massimiliano di Langosco, something like that. I probably got it approximately right. Max is a long colleague of mine and has also become a good friend. We had the previous podcast that we had with Helen Edwards. It's going to be a hard one to follow. She was brilliant, and we got some lessons learned from that. The next step we want to do is we're really into having guests on who can kind of talk about the philosophies and the potentials and where things are going. But we always like to kind of bring it back down on the ground and have guests also who are in the thick of things. And when I mean in the thick of things, who are practicing it, okay? Max, you introduced yourself last time, right? You have a long-standing experience in project management, program management, portfolio management, PMO. So he's a serious player when it comes to pedigree in the PPPM area. And the reason why I wanted to have you on after Helen was because you are also kind of in the thick of things when it comes to AI. You can tell us a little bit about some of the things that you've already developed. And I think you are a good spokesperson for those other project managers and PMO managers out there who says, okay, please tell me, where do I start? What do I do? What are ideas? Okay. So welcome on board.
Thank you.
Yeah. We talked very long about what we could talk about, and we have so many different points. But let's talk about some of the potential goal options that we want to cover. One of the things you wrote down on our pre-check list was to prepare the human and not just the tech, right?
Right.
For those who don't understand what the heck that is, what did you mean with that?
Well, the point that I was suggesting there was that it's important also to observe not just what technology we're deploying, but who's going to be supported by it. And we have quite a quick growth in technology, especially if we're looking at the AI specifically, right? I mean, the AI that we use today is so much better than the ChatGPT 3 years ago. So, I mean, it's really quickly growing and the applications are growing. But at the same time is our professional skill set also growing, right? So the two need to grow in parallel. Our tools can do more and more and more, but if we don't catch up with them, or if we don't also grow, the tools really will start eating away at our professional capabilities rather than just our job. Right? So it's really important that there is a human aspect in the way we deploy, the way we really configure the usage of AI in our professions. And it should be a loop. The tool improves, but the human skill sets improve. The tool improves, the human skill sets improve. It should be something that works together.
Now, you're a long-standing educator, just like I am, right, in different companies, big, large companies. Where do you see most companies standing right now with their development of AI skills? Because that's one of the things we're talking about. If we want to involve the human being and make them more deterministic in the way also that AI develops, right? Also from its design or its purpose, right?
Or at least more determined.
Yeah, getting people up to speed on what the heck it is and what it can do is a key factor, right? How would you judge right now the companies that you've seen? How prepared are they?
There's big differences. It's really it's difficult to say this is the situation, right? For example, very big companies tend to be much further down the line. I work with a lot of small and medium-sized companies, mainly in Southern Europe and Italy, and they are really at the very beginning. And they are struggling to implement things properly. So the difference between these two types of companies, right, the big massive corporations and the small family-owned companies, is becoming wider and wider and wider. So that cannot be a good thing, right? Yeah. That is something that must be.
Do you see different challenges, whether it's small, medium, or large? Or is it a similar dilemma that they're facing when it comes to upskilling?
Different challenges, definitely different challenges. And it's not that the challenges for the big companies are less complex than they are for the small company. That's not the point. The challenges are different, but they are complex for the company, no matter what it is that you're referring to. But the capabilities are different. If I'm whatever, Philips or SAP, I can throw a couple of million onto the table in order to get something started. If I'm a small company that has 150 employees, that million might be the margin that I have at the end of the year. So the capabilities that these companies have, the opportunities that they have, are very different. And so also the approach that they take when starting something is very different, right?
Do you see equal opportunities for organizations regardless of their size? Is there proportional? I mean, is it kind of do small and medium-sized companies get the same bang for the buck that a big one does, or is there a point where a company says, okay, I'm missing the boat, I need to get on board, or?
Yeah. So they're definitely they are knowledgeable about the fact that there's a boat passing along. Only many companies can't find it. Okay. Right? As for equal opportunity or same impact, no, the impacts are very different. But you're also talking about different types of usages. If you and by the way, that doesn't just depend on the size of the company, but also on what the company is actually doing. Right? Is it an industrial process? Is it a service company? Is it a software company? What are we talking about? So the what you're expecting from AI is extremely different, and the investments that you need to make depend on that. However, if you are working in a context in which numbers are important, in which you have a huge amount of data that you need to crunch, that essentially means that you need to make big investments. It's not just a ChatGPT license that we're talking about. So you need to make big investments in machine learning and bringing things up to speed internally. And many smaller companies just can't do that.
Yeah. The reason I'm asking kind of these strategic level questions is because the topic that we're kind of leading into is, user preparation skills that matter. We have kind of this background where we're often upskilling maybe middle management. Maybe the range goes from team leaders to maybe senior management. But from my experience with some of the clients that I have, I often find that the level that needs as much upskilling as everybody else is the top level. Is that your experience as well?
Oh yeah, for sure. And by the way, the top level is often, not always, but often also the older level. And so then there tends to be a certain resistance towards, it's going to be okay, right? We're going to somehow deal with it. We've dealt with other stuff. Come on, it can't be worse than the financial crisis. and so somehow there's this attitude that lets things go by, which is not true for everybody. There's a lot of people also in small and medium companies that know perfectly well that they should be on the boat, and they are actively working to learn to bring themselves to a point in which they can actually make investments. But finding the right partners, finding the right knowledge, actually having a clear idea of what am I actually supposed to do? What opportunities could this bring to me? Can it just summarize my emails, or could it actually fast forward my production processes? So the approach that there is one of a lot of question marks, and it's not that easy to answer them.
Maybe we can revisit this question in a more structured fashion, because like I said, we're trying to also give our listeners and viewers kind of maybe some ideas of, hey, if I'm in this situation, where do I start off? And you've been in situations like this. Let's say you have a medium-sized company, I don't know, in France or in Italy, that comes to you and say, listen, Max, I want you to help us with AI. We have kind of a rudimentary understanding, but we don't know where, why, what. I will say this as a precursor. I'm sure you're familiar with it. We talked about the MIT report that came out a while back, where I think the numbers, don't kill me if I get the numbers wrong, but I think they were talking about that in the market, $500 billion has been invested in AI, and only 5% of companies claim to have gotten a return of investment, which is kind of a dismal report, okay? On the other side, I think we all...
Unless that $5 trillion was invested by the same 5%.
Yeah, I think the statement was it's across the board and only 5%. And I think there's even you have to discount some of those 5% that say, at what level they're getting a return of investment, and if it's proportional. And actually, this was a question that I've asked a couple people already. Maybe I'll ask you before we get to the process of how a medium-sized company should go about it. I've actually, thought about this, and I said, the Ralph Stacey matrix?
No.
The Ralph Stacey matrix is a fairly simple graphic that kind of explains the difference between simple, complicated, complex, and chaotic, right? And it says, can you define what you want, and do you know how to do it? And if you don't know what you want, and you don't know how to do it, it's called house of pain, right? And that's kind of the place the chaotic area, right? And then once you get into, when you move it a little bit further in and it becomes complex, then you use like agile and hybrid versions and all. It's kind of it's an interesting model. Yeah. But what I love most about this graphic is this.
Except that, of course, it ends up with saying, you should use predictive project management when you're down at the bottom left corner, which makes absolutely
Actually, it's
no
line
sense.
management that you use down here. It's funny because this is day-to-day line structure, but this is actually the biggest box and not this right here. But anyways, let's talk about this house of pain, because I've always been fascinated with this. And this leads to my question, actually. If you don't really know what you're talking about, which I think matches a lot of the clients that we face when it comes to AI?
Well, they certainly have doubts as to how to proceed.
Yeah. So it's the what. They don't know what do we want, right? What should we want? Okay. They have this pressure, FOMO, fear of missing out. And then on the other hand, even less, they don't know how. So they're in that house of pain. And actually the advice, if you're in a house of pain, is you shouldn't be the first mover. You should sit it out, let everybody else make the mistakes and learn from their mistakes, right? And then you'll have a return of investment. Do you think that's a valid strategy?
I think that's in general a valid strategy, especially if you don't have money to lose. Right? Yeah. If you can throw money at it and continue making mistakes, in that case, then of course, no. Then you want to be the first one. Yeah. But why not? Yeah. Absolutely. Observe everybody else and learn from their mistakes. Not to mention that many of we're not talking about first movers anymore. Yeah. Many of small and medium companies, if these are the ones that we're mainly focusing on, they are already second movers, right? The stuff has already been done. They don't need to invent anything. So we would already be a little bit.
Okay,
it's
so we're
chaotic for them.
It's chaotic for them, but there's people who understand the complexity and can bring them into that area of complexity and maybe guide them through. So it becomes. So how would you, if you were to advise a medium-sized company that comes to you and say, Max, what do we need to do to become AI literate, or AI functional would probably be more important than AI literate, because AI literate is a passive process.
First of all, there are different paths that you follow, right? So what we would do is we would evaluate their current maturity level and then decide what gaps they have, where do they want to go, the usual stuff. But the point is, at the very beginning, if you are at the very beginning, then the first thing that needs to happen is that you need to develop a certain sense of comfort with it. So you need to start using it. And you can use it on a lot of relatively simple tasks. However, then what typically happens is that the next step is look at your production processes, identify pain points, and ask yourself, how can AI help you there? And while this is a very useful and helpful step, it often ends up being the conclusion of the work, right? We've identified that we can speed up process A by using AI, process B we can eliminate some waste or whatever. And that's certainly helpful, but it's not going to give you an ROI that you're going to be happy with. And instead, very often, that's exactly where we stop. Instead, this step of identifying potential areas of improvement within an existing process is just a temporary stepping stone. The real value that you get from introducing AI is by looking at your processes and overhauling the whole process through the usage of AI. So you're saying, how would I do the whole thing if I have the instruments to use AI on it? And this changes the actual processes. So corporate processes need to change in order to make the most of AI. You can't just speed up point A and empower point B. That's just a temporary patch. You really need to change the actual processes. Earlier you were mentioning the fact that we work in training and in helping development, right? So that's a very obvious example. If what you're saying is, I can take lesson A, and since it's just knowledge base, I can let you interact with an AI and learn from there. That's nice. That's cute, right? But it doesn't change the system that you're looking at. And what you end up with is people are frustrated because they have less work, because they don't know what their future is going to be, and so on and so on. Instead, if you take the whole learning ecosystem and rebuild it using AI, you end up with an ecosystem which looks completely different. We don't have a class anymore, but you still have human beings who support the professionals in our case, right? Only they support them from a coaching perspective, they support them in much more value-based ways. So essentially you're rebuilding the way of working, not fixing this, fixing that.
Yeah. You're coming at it from kind of from a high level, which I think is appropriate. If you're coming into the company, I think you should start at the top and start asking questions. What are your expectations? What's your vision? What's your strategy? Where do you want to go with this? What do you want to even optimize? What are some of the guiding principles?
Where is value in your organization?
Yeah, where is there a potential? So it's kind of an executive approach, the top down, which I think, and there's this model that I picked up. I think it's from I think it was from PMI's PMO model, I picked it up, this concept that you can probably make more layers, but you have the strategic level, you have the tactical or functional level, and you have the operational level. And each has its own needs and has its own structure and its own guidance.
Yeah.
If I may, let me share an example of a medium-sized multinational company that I recently came across. They're very ambitious when it comes to AI, at least from a visionary perspective. Their board members have communicated publicly already that they're committed and they're on the forefront of AI thoughts, and they're buying up AI companies, and they've already integrated AI into the products that they provide to their clients. And I had the opportunity to, on an operational and on a tactical level, meet some of their project managers and some of the people that are working with it, right?
They have no idea.
And like I said, we have this wonderful manifesto that the company's basically written of what we're committed to. And I read it and I was like so excited. And the first thing I did is I went into the group and said, does anybody know this manifesto? And people were like, no.
What?
I said, let me share it with you. Let me tell you what your boss is saying. Which I'm not making fun of it. It's funny, but I'm not making fun of it. I think it's a normal.
Why not? It deserves being made fun of, right?
It's normal, right? So, and it kind of alludes to an issue that I've seen many, many times in my consulting career, that the idea kind of springs out and there's all sorts of wonderful castles in the sky, pie in the sky ideas, which is valuable. We need that. We really need that. And then, so you have a top down, and then there's a kind of initiative bottom up, right? And I asked them, I said, well, which AI tools do you use? And there were like, I think 2 or 3 that were sanctioned, that I was told about. And then I found out there was like many other ones, right? And it was really refreshing. And we kind of were sharing use cases, who uses what for what, but there was no uniformity and there was no governance. And I didn't think it was a negative phenomenon. I think it's just a normal phenomenon that when you're dealing with such a transformative new technology, okay, that it takes time for the vision that's on the top and the initiatives that are at the bottom, the grassroots thing, to meet in the middle and to have some kind of structure.
I don't agree.
You don't agree?
No.
I'm all ears.
I think they will meet sometime.
Yeah, they need to meet, otherwise it's useless.
But it's useless anyway.
Yeah.
They will meet because it would have happened anyway,
Yeah.
right? Only it'll happen far too late,
Yeah.
and it'll happen in the most expensive way possible. Instead, the reason for which you have this gap between the vision and what is actually happening grassroots has nothing to do with AI. This has
Yes,
to
I agree
do
with you.
with any type of
Yeah,
change
any type of change.
initiative that corporate management did. I mean, come on, we've heard it a million times. We need to be lean, we need to be proactive, we need to be whatever, we need to
have a value-driven PMO.
Absolutely. Right?
Yeah.
So what's the issue there? The issue is change management. And that's maybe a different podcast, but the essential message is that people don't change because you tell them to change. Culture is something that you can observe. You can go into an organization. We do this all the time, right? You go into an organization and you observe and say, okay, I've observed the culture of this organization. How do we do that? We do that by observing the behavior that people have, right? So you say, okay, if this is the behavioral patterns that I see repeating themselves, I interpret that there is a certain culture. However, we both know that, and anybody who has kids out there knows, that you can talk about behavior or about culture as much as you like, it's not going to change, right? I want you to be more entrepreneurial. Oh, okay, yeah, sure, yes, sir. It's not going to change anything. So people don't change because you tell them to change behavior. Behavior changes because motivation changes. Motivators need to shift. At that point, behavior changes. You have behavior because you have motivations for a specific behavior. And motivation depends on needs. By the way, this is a circle. Culture feeds the needs. Yeah. So needs, motivators, behavior, culture, and it cycles around that way. So you can observe culture and you can observe behavior. You cannot observe motivators and you cannot observe needs. But you can act on needs and motivators. You can support somebody's needs. You can help them overcome some needs. You can help them develop certain motivation. That you can do. And then you can observe if the behavior changes. But leadership, if leadership comes to they write a manifesto. Boys and girls, you need to behave.
Well, they're not even that far. They've just communicated that they're open, and they're. It's funny enough on an external towards the client, they seem to be more mature in their AI approach. Question mark. I haven't been able to take a look at it, but I'll take their word for it. And this is my observation on a grassroots level. Their employees are completely enthusiastic and motivated, but there's no structure. So between strategy and operations, okay, operations, they want to do stuff. They don't want to organize stuff. These people want to see stuff, but they don't want to organize stuff either. There needs to be that level in between that says, and we talked about we talked about this before we started the podcast. I tell you, one of the classic questions I often ask my guests is, "Thank you for sharing your philosophy. If I buy into your philosophy, who's doing it? How are they doing it? And when are they doing it?" That's kind of the nature of our project management in this, right? So let's go. It's a long-winded line up to the question. Let's go back to this structural. If somebody says, "Okay, we're in the house of pain. I'm going to come to Max. Max is further along in the game. You already have experience with a number of different AI concepts. You have a long experience with all these transformations and change. I agree with you. This transformation in its issues is not different than any other one, right? The top down and bottom. When do they meet is the question. Yeah. We talked a little bit about, yes, we need to start at the top because we need to talk to the head. We need to clear the head. We need to hear, what are your visions? What are your ideas? Let me give you some, maybe nudge them along the way. Hey, maybe you want to take a look at this. Maybe give them a simple checklist. Ask what processes have the greatest potential for AI application? The low-hanging fruit, right? So that's on a strategic level. Where do we go from there? Because that we obviously just mentioned that's not enough.
And by the way, I wouldn't even call it strategic level.
I'm being kind.
Yeah, you are, definitely. So
that's the theory.
So first of all, yes, absolutely, you should start at the strategic level. But I must say that most companies that I speak with, they've already done this.
Have they really though?
Yeah. So the point is they need to ask themselves the real strategic question, which is, what do I need to do in order for my company to survive? Mm-hmm. This is the only real strategic question that there is. Everything else is pretty much tactics. Mm-hmm. So if AI falls into the answer that you give to this question, right, for my company to exist, you have to define what my company is, which isn't easy, but okay. Yeah. For my company to exist in 10 years, AI needs to be part of the picture. Okay, now you have a strategic assertion. With you. And by the way, this is not necessarily true for every company, right?
Yeah.
If my business, right, if my business is making pet portraits, for example, right? At that point, AI is not necessarily part of the picture. Maybe, but it's not a strategic part of the picture. So for many companies, however it is, for example, this company that you mentioned, clearly AI is fundamental for them since they are already embedding it into their products. Yeah. So good. They have understood that is a strategic portion of their work. Now comes the tactical enablement of that. Now, tactical enablement is time-based. While the strategic assertion is an absolute, The tactical assertions are time-based. What do I do now? What do I do in a year? What do I do in 5 years?
Breaking it down.
Right. And
what structures do I need? What budget do I need to assign? What governance? What principles are we going by?
Projects do I run?
Exactly. Structural. The middle management stuff that nobody likes to talk about.
Absolutely. And that's our stuff, right?
Yeah.
Projects, programs, portfolios,
Yeah.
and the portfolios should enable the strategic assertion. Mm-hmm. Now, at the initial level, so what do I do if I'm starting at the very beginning, right? There, for example, you can bring in issues such as what you mentioned. I talk to my employees. I see in which area there could be most low-hanging fruits. I think you called them, right? So that can be useful.
Quick wins. So they get their feet wet and say, "Oh, this is fun."
But this is change management. This isn't even deploying a solution. This is getting people motivated by giving them the quick wins so that they can see that there is a progress ongoing. Right? Instead, you need to make sure that this progress which is evolving is in line with where you're going. For example, you mentioned that this company already has AI embedded in their projects. In their products.
Their products. Caveat, just quick caveat, I don't want to interrupt you, which I'm famous for, sorry, is I think they feel a pressure externally because of their reputation with their clients and because all the clients go,
"Where's AI?
Everybody's talking about AI. I don't know what the hell it is. We're not really doing it, but we expect it from you.
Yeah.
So show us.
Yeah.
Give us, we want to buy your product, but if it doesn't have AI on it, if it doesn't have the AI ISO sticker on it, then where do we get
it? For sure. Yeah. And of course, if that's the only pressure that you're getting, then there's a lot of easy wins that you can do. No, you can put in some fancy features here and there, and customers go, "Oh, wow, yeah." But this doesn't change your way of working. It doesn't change the way you create those products. It doesn't change the way you maintain those products. It doesn't change the way you operate improvements and versioning and all that. So how do you introduce it into your existence, into the way of being of an organization? And that is then the next step. So you can put your patches and you can be proud, go around proudly, "Oh, wow, we've integrated it, great." But this is a stepping stone. At a certain point, the question needs to be, how do we change our internal processes in order to embed AI into the picture? And at that point, and here we can go back to that human aspect, and this is the point in which you then have to say, good, how do my employees need to change in order to use AI-enhanced processes? And typically the idea is that, for example, we are mainly interested in project managers. Project managers need to move more and more towards understanding value, understanding how the deliverables impact the strategic goals, because AI will be constantly producing options. We could do A or B. A has these advantages, B has those advantages. But it needs to be then who's leading it, who says, go with A, go with B, right? And in order to be able, for the human to be able to make those decisions, it's not enough that they know earned value management or they know how to build a schedule. They need to have a strategic mindset which enables them to identify the higher value in the different options that the AI is doing. Otherwise, what we end up with is AI managing the company and human beings just doing the groundwork. While what we want is the exact contrary, and the successful outcome of all this is the exact contrary. Human beings deciding the direction and the AI doing all the groundwork.
You've said a couple things that I'm 100% aligned with and kind of trigger me in adding a thing or two. You mentioned the value thing. I think that is the biggest buzzword we have right now in project management.
I hope
if
so.
you look at
and
you know what,
Kirshner brought it in 25 years ago.
Yeah. And you and I probably, maybe because we have a different background. You know, I originally came from product management and marketing, and I always aspired to be in senior management. So for me, financial literacy and focus on what really matters, and I wanted to be involved with strategy even when I was not anywhere close to it. I wrote down here the value hammer. Although it's a buzzword and the PMO framework uses it, it's in the new PMBOK guide. It's the new buzzword to save project management from any kind of cost cutting or resource elimination, which I would not be in favor of one way or the other.
It just can't happen.
No, but because you and I are deeply embedded, although you and I are fluent in strategic thought and thinking, right? And this is what you said, which is really, really important, is for it to really impact the culture, it has to go through at least 3 layers. So it has to go through that strategic level, it has to go through that functional tactical level, and at some point it has to be translated into a day-to-day operative thing. But what you said, which is really, really important, which I wanted to underline, is the middle level cannot afford to not be semi-fluent in strategic thinking and system thinking, because if they're not, if they say, hey, that's the job of upper management, we can't interfere, we can't ask questions, you're going to have a weak structure that's not going to stand up. So that's one thing. I think a lot of the...
It's a fundamental insight, absolutely fundamental.
Some of what always fascinates me, and I know you're a polyglot, you're kind of a Renaissance man, there's lots of different things that you and I are interested in, and we kind of see how they're puzzle pieces that fit together. But one of the things that always fascinates me, particularly when I talk to technical project managers, if you talk to them about value, if you talk to them about net present value, internal rate of return, return of investment, burn rate, they get this haze over their eyes, right? And their eyes start crossing, and they go, "Oh my God, do I really have to deal with this? Is this really part of my job?" So that's one thing I want to point out. But I think that I would agree with you. There needs to be a constant interaction, because the thing about strategy is it's often lofty, it's often vague, and it needs fuel. It needs air for that fire to burn, and that air has to come from the bottom. You have to blow that air up there and say, hey, okay, I'm going to take you by your vision. What about this? Left or right? Red or blue?
Did you understand?
Did you understand it? Well, this is the consequence of that interpretation of the vision. Is this what you want, or do you want me to do something else?
But very often, so a couple of points. First of all, yes, value, absolutely, but not just financial value.
Yeah.
And secondly, strategy is very often lofty. You're completely right. But that, in at least my take on it, is that with a lot of customers that I work with, you go there, you talk to them, and it's obvious from the very start that they haven't got the faintest clue why they are doing it. So you talk to them, you say, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? And they explain, because this way we managed to bring this product to the market, whatever. All very true, except that it has nothing to do with strategy. Right? Strategy is not something that you plan. Strategy is something that you observe and you recognize. And maybe you've recognized it, maybe you got it wrong. And if you got it wrong, you're probably in trouble. Yeah. But you don't get to choose it. You just observe it. And this is something that I notice is really, I mean, otherwise it's just tactics, just a little bit longer term.
Yeah, tactics without strategy is...
You need to have a clear understanding of where you're going and why you need to be there. And that's why earlier I was saying tactics is essentially the answer to the question, how am I still here in 10 years, right? And because that obliges you to A, know who you are, and B, evaluate what's happening to your industry, to your market. And it's the combination of these that can give you a strategy. I
also liked it, and you said it a second time, so I'm going to take it now as a cue. You said you said 10 years, and I love the fact that you said that. I'm actually, Monica and I are working on an NGO project, and we also determined we're going to set up a 10-year plan, right? And there's this wonderful saying, and nobody can say who it's from, if it's from Steve Jobs or from somebody else. We all overestimate what you can do in a year, and we all underestimate what we can do in 10. What I liked about the fact that you said 10 years is because I agree with you, strategy is not something that's short-term, it's something that has short-term elements, but it has to have mid-term and long-term thought. And that's important, and that's kind of the job from the top. But if the top decides where we want to be in 10 years, the middle needs to decide
needs to recognize
how, and what releases, and what structure, who's doing what, and what are the milestones along the way, right? Because quite honestly, the people who do the work, and I don't know how often I hear this from people at the bottom. We're really motivated. We'll do whatever we're told, but we don't want to have to organize your chaos. Can you get your act together and tell us what you want? Kind of the Spice Girl principle. Tell me what you want, what you really, really want. So I like that. And I'm going to ask you another thing. This is another thing that I kind of reflected on what you said. You're familiar with the term OKRs, right? Objectives and key results. I don't like that terminology. I never got warm with it, and I'll tell you why. I prefer the statement outputs, outcomes, and impacts. And I'll tell you why I have my problem with OKRs. Although they're not bad, and it kind of reflects on what you said now. You kind of were talking about the top has to define what they want and why they want it, and then you kind of snuck it in there. But this is what I heard, and this is what I also feel from our experience, is that the next level also has to, from a different perspective, ask what is it they want on our level, right, and why we want it. And the bottom level has to ask that question. That's and that was my big issue with OKRs is, I always say OKRs for whom? For the operational level, for the tactical level, or for the strategic, because they're not the same. Yeah. They're overlapping sometimes, but they're not the same. Is that your take on it as well?
Look, I was working. Tomorrow I'll be with a company here. You know them well.
Yeah, great company.
And the whole point is that they purchased the company, and this second company needs to align their strategy with the first one. And the whole point is, what does this alignment mean, right? Does it simply mean, tell me what you want, what you really, really want, and I'll get along and do it? Yeah. No, of course not. It means I need to have my strategy in order to be worthwhile your including me in your environment. So this idea of a strategic definition, it goes all the way down. This is exactly what I mean with that human development. Most of our project managers, for example, they know how to get from A to B, and they know how to deal with a crisis. They're really good at it. And if you throw the worst crap at them, they'll deal with it. But they don't know why they need to be at B. So if things change, they'll still be going to B, because they don't know that actually they should go to B1 or to B3. Yeah. Instead, what we need is AI supporting project managers doing the reporting, the sending the reports, sending the meeting minutes, evaluating stakeholders, etc., etc. But the project manager should observe the options that emerge from this analysis and be able to choose. Oops, we need to go to B3 instead of B1. But they need to have the education to make these strategic decisions. And currently, we're not there yet, no matter how much PMBOK talks about value.
Let me throw another thing. I know another thing that you're a specialist on, and you've done. I've heard you speak on it eloquently and very engagingly, is the concept of system thinking, right? Oh, yeah. I want to make a small excursion in that, because I told you I was listening in the car when I was on the way to the dentist today. I was listening to a audiobook, and it was talking about system thinking, and it was great. A little bit lofty sometimes, but really, really great. And one of the things that I picked up in the conversation, which kind of stuck with me, and I don't have the correct terminology, but I think it was something in the direction of self-direction. It was basically talking about how systems often use processes and cultural elements to determine how the way of working. And we said the human system, yeah. And what it talked about is this. I don't think it was the word self-direction, but I think you know what I mean with self-direction. This autonomous. You don't have to tell me what to do. I'll take care of it.
So systems tend to have especially complex systems and systems that are able to, we call them complex adaptive systems they tend to have something that we call emergent properties.
Yeah.
Now,
it was under that, yeah.
Okay. So in human systems, these emergent properties often end up being decisions that are taken collectively, even though there isn't a specific human who is driving that decision.
Yeah.
And this might be...
It went a step further, and this is what I want to get back to this 3 different layers, which I think is a good guideline to come back to the original question, how do we prepare a company for AI, is if to understand that you have to satisfy these 3 levels, and there needs to be engagement between the 3. And what I think the strategic level is always irritated with is, why are you on the functional level asking me all sorts of questions? Just do it. Right? I think that every layer is hoping for the other layer to develop that self-direction, that autonomy, where if the process doesn't answer your question, Max will take care of it, right? that kind of that magic, I don't know why it works, but it works. And this is something I say, that I think a lot of companies bank on the fact that a lot of companies are really good because their employees take care of the crappy processes or the lack of processes that they have.
They find the workarounds.
Yeah. Now, in this audiobook, it talks about how that scientists for a long time thought that was such a complex process that it couldn't be determined what the process of developing that autonomy is, or it couldn't be measured. But I suppose that there's new insights on this. Let's bring it back onto the AI subject. If we're looking at the strategic, functional, and operational level, isn't the goal ultimately in upskilling, right, that we create 3 different layers or maybe even more within the organization that has a clear understanding of what their OKRs are, right? What are their objectives on their level and their key results? What is it for the level above? What's at the level below, so they can translate and interact with one another? Shouldn't the goal kind of be, especially since we're kind of at the dawn of AI hype, right? That a lot of companies would really do good for themselves if yes, there's a top down and there's a bottom up, but maybe there's a middle every which way, that there was a little bit of autonomy. People felt that we kind of use this budding frontier to kind of have fun, maybe not make it the Wild West, but that every layer of the organization is carrying part of the, you know where I'm going with this?
I'm not sure.
I think a lot of people say, well, if we've got a new transformation, we got to wait till we're totally organized. And I don't think that's realistic. I think this has to grow organically.
Sure. Yeah. There's no such total organized. I mean, we don't even know
how to get there. That's a 10-year plan.
Where we want to be.
That's a 10-year plan. Yeah. But if we're talking about, okay, so we've got a 10-year plan on how to get where we want to go, let's talk about the first 2 years. I mean,
so you're splitting it down in the different layers, and that makes sense, right? But it's not the full picture. Yeah. So one thing is, how do individuals, at the moment you're talking about layers, you're talking about individuals.
Individuals is at the bottom of it, right? But essential.
Absolutely. So how do individuals use AI in order to perform their own tasks? Mm-hmm. And this is absolutely important. And for sure it's going to be part of those first 2 years that you're referring to, right? So how do we help them get accustomed to it, accept the concept that this is somehow an extension of themselves rather than a sparring partner, if you want. We often talk about sparring partners when we're talking about AI. Actually, it can act as a sparring partner. It is in reality an extension of the individual. So as we can help individuals accept this and grow. And this is true at all of the different levels. What the individuals can do with this definitely will change. However, the moment you bring systems thinking, and in particular systems dynamics into it, you've altered the picture. Yeah. Because at this point, it's not a question of individuals, but it's a question of relationships between the individuals. So now you're observing, how do these relationships develop? How do these relationships strengthen or weaken? Which relationships break completely and disappear? So the moment you introduce AI at a systems dynamics level, you are changing the way the human framework works. That lattice that holds the company together changes. It doesn't mean it becomes worse. It can be extremely more powerful, but you need to know what you're doing.
But it'll also go through growing pains and stuff. We'll talk about some of the...
It might kill it.
Yeah.
So you need to know what you're doing, right? Now, do you need to go all that way? No, not necessarily, right? In most maturity growths, we stop at level 2, level 3, whatever. We get to a certain point and we say, yeah, I'm good here, right? And so what we have is, we have the AI little agent that helps me rationalize my email, whatever. Nice. But if you really want to embed AI into your organization, your maturity growth must continue from there. And at that point, this lattice structure of your organization, which is those processes that I was referring to earlier, change. Yeah.
Well, what you're I think you're addressing the big issue is that you can enable, you can create AI literacy at the bottom, but if there's not somehow a thread that goes from the top to the bottom, you're exposing yourself to a whole bunch of different risk.
You don't want the organization to work at different speeds.
Yeah. So, but if we go back to these 3 different levels, strategic, tactical, operational, and we could call it meta, macro, micro. Let's talk real briefly about, does it make sense to create literacy at the grassroots of an organization?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, yes, of course. I mean, it depends what the organization is doing, right? So, but if your objective, if we're still talking about an organization like the one that you've mentioned that has as vision that of embedding AI into their existence, then everybody needs to be involved.
I don't know. This is an example, and we have to always be careful when one uses historical examples that one's experienced, whether it's really a guideline for everything. But I think it's a good guideline. A company that I won't mention, also a large multinational company, a lot of the products that they deliver to their clients, they're not of a software, they're a hardware nature, and they're fairly complex, so they had to deliver them as projects. They would install them, right? And this organization has been around for a long time. And the grassroots of the organization realized that project management was an elemental part of their delivery process. But there was never an acknowledgement, a serious acknowledgement from the top. It was kind of like, that's operational, figure it out yourself, right? So this organization has multiple national subsidiaries and multiple business units, and by the nature of their business, because they needed a process for project management at a grassroots level, maybe a little bit on a tactical level, they started developing their own project management standards. Okay, some of them borrowed from PMI, some of them borrowed from IPMA, some of them borrowed from Prince 2, some of them invented the wheel new.
Of course, everybody,
whatever, right?
Yeah,
okay,
locally there.
And it was a big, large global village of different PM communities that there was no really issue because every business unit was doing their own thing. And it was
Each
kind
one
of
felt that they should be global.
And it was a grassroots thing, and it was part of their culture, it was part of their hidden culture, their established culture. Somewhere along the line, the upper management, which was, I guess, a step in evolution, said, you know what, project management is important. You know, we're involved in this process. And they said, you know what, it doesn't make sense that we have 15 different standards. We need to have a common language. We need to have a common process. We need to streamline. We need to have an academy. We need to educate people. We need to fulfill our responsibility on an executive, senior management, middle management level in supporting our staff. And that was a long transformation process, and they actually did it. And for me, that was one of those really distinct examples of how a lot of initiatives begin grassroots, and then the top kind of kickstarts, and then somewhere they meet in the middle. I'm not saying that there weren't some growing pains and there weren't some serious discussions and politics going on, but I thought that was a great example.
It is. It is a great example. And there are companies that go through the same process. I mean, it's quite a... and what you've noticed is essentially how in many companies project management becomes a strategic skill set.
But let's use that example and apply it to the AI if it makes sense to apply it, right? I have the feeling from some of the clients that I've interacted with that there's some rumblings going on Mount Olympus. The Greek gods are throwing lightning bolts, but nobody knows what the heck is going on, except every once in a while there's something on Instagram or something, right? And at the bottom, it's kind of the frontier, right? We have a couple tools.
Trying things, yeah.
That, I don't even know what you're doing, and there's no guidelines, do you think a grassroots initiative for AI is important? That regardless of whether the company is from the maturity or from its structural, if the middle's not ready, do you think that the grassroots should become AI literate, and should they be trained, and should they learn about prompting and what systems are out there, and do you think that's important?
So first of all, we are talking about big companies.
Yeah. I would only big companies. Shouldn't we
we're
include
talking about thousands of people.
Okay.
Because when you're smaller than that, then the dynamics are different.
Okay.
However, in a company that has a global presence, they have a multinational presence, I think that not only it's useful if there is no global initiative, not only it is useful to have grassroots initiatives, but they will come no matter what. So even if management says, no, we don't want AI, you would have grassroots initiatives anyway. However, it would be much better if this development went hand in hand, so that management created the occasion for the grassroots initiatives, observes the development of these grassroots initiatives, harvests best practices where they are, and creates a common culture, a common way of doing things, just as you observed in the development of a grassroots PMO, essentially, because that's what you had observed. Mm-hmm. There could be something similar also in AI. Mm-hmm. And at a certain point, this initiative needs to coalesce. Okay. Now, there is another challenge, however, that relates to AI, which is cybersecurity. Mm-hmm. The moment you are focusing on developing the possibility for different people to use different tools, now all of a sudden you're creating all sorts of risks.
I'm going to jump in here. It's tickling me in the back of my head. Cybersecurity and a whole bunch of other issues, I think, are part of the avoid trap things that I think we should definitely discuss. If I may, though, let's have out this grassroots discussion, and then we can go to the okay, it's good, but what is the dangers and how to address and maybe eliminate these dangers. Let's talk about, because I feel, if you look at, for example, the Post-it example of 3M. Do you know the story of Post-its from 3M?
It was a mistake, and then
they were tinkering. They were supposedly they were trying to create a glue that was very sticky, that would hold, and they created exactly this limp thing, right? And they didn't know what to do with it. And actually, it was never a product that was sanctioned by upper management. Okay, but they were tinkering with it, and they thought it was fun that they could take it and do it and stuff like that. And then sales said, "Oh, that's cool. Can we do that as a Christmas gift?" And then after Christmas, a lot of the clients that they gave it as a gift, these Post-its, started wanting to order it, but there was no item number for it. And upper management said, "What the hell is going on? Who authorized this?"
Useful,
and then now it's one of the biggest products. And supposedly, I don't know if this is true. This is the lore of it. 3M learned from it and says, "You know what?" And that's what I'm trying to address here. I think that. I think if we want to have a cultural change, I think we really need to light the fire from different areas. And I think lighting it at the bottom with some guidance, I'm with you. We'll talk about the dangers of it, because there are some serious dangers. is that if you have a couple freaks in the company who are like ahead of other people and start thinking, oh, I've got this tool, and they start finding places to apply and they tinker with it, and then they carry it up. I think there's a lot of potential there.
Absolutely.
And so I'll give you an example. I have a Swiss company that recently reached out to me, and they have a head of projects there. And he says, yeah, we've been happy with the way things are going. We don't really do formal project management. Everybody does it their own way. We want to do it a little bit more uniform. And so we trained that, and we talked about the value of common language and synergies, and if one person gets sick, the other one can jump in, and higher efficiency in communication and stuff like that. And now they're on board with the AI thing, and they're kind of they've chosen an AI tool, Claude, and they're creating projects in Claude, and I've showed them how to put in their characteristics and their descriptions, and how to upload files and stuff, and how to prompt it and stuff like that. So these are examples of on an operational level, okay? Also a little bit on a tactical level, showing operational people the value of using AI on a daily basis. And also taking away a little bit of this apprehension, oh my God, it's going to give me more work, or it's going to take my job away. And I keep saying, no, it's just going to accelerate, right? Would you agree with that? Is that is that your vision, or are you one of those? You're not one of those misanthropes that thinks that we're all going to be replaced, do you?
I'd replace some people.
That's a personal issue.
So first of all, I completely agree with the tinkering idea. So that I think is it's absolutely valuable in a company if you leave some space for the outliers, right? Leave some space for randomness, for the emergence of something that nobody had planned for, right? So I think that is definitely valuable. The bigger the system, the bigger this is true. The more this is true. Now, as for what happens once we do implement it and what type of effect does it have on the professionality of people? Well, that depends on what we're going to do with it, right? I mean, this is a tool.
Yeah.
It's not going to do miracles. It's not going to do anything by itself. Mm-hmm. It's going to do what we decide we're going to do with it. Mm-hmm. If we decide that I want to eliminate all lawyers, I'll eliminate all lawyers. I'll end up with a system which I might not be happy with, but hey, when with COVID we ended up, instead of doing live classes, doing
online classes.
Yeah, were we happy with it? Do you think that's better? No, of course it isn't, but it's still substituted.
I still remember the day when I used to hate online classes. Now it's like my daily bread and butter.
So the fact that we are not happy with the outcome doesn't mean it's not going to happen.
And it doesn't mean that you don't eventually warm up to it and that it has certain benefits.
It certainly has benefits. It's cheaper, right? But in any case, the point is the fact that an outcome is not 100% as good as the current situation is not a reason for believing that we will not end up there. Yeah. We will not end up there only if we have an alternative vision and we strive for that alternative vision. And I believe that the alternative vision will be much more valuable. But if the predominant vision is, I want to substitute as many people as possible, we will end up substituting people. Yeah. The point is not the tool. The point is the humans who operate.
Yeah, it's not the hammer, it's the one who's wielding the hammer. Right. What are you using it for?
Right. Yeah. So I believe that those of us who have an idea in mind of what cooperation can look like, using this tool as a servant of the human beings, should work on it and should bring it forward.
I see you're chomping at the bit to get to some of the dangers and traps. We're going to get to that. Cybersecurity and that. Remember those two. One last loop before we get to that. Okay. I didn't just bring you on the podcast because you have experience with AI. I brought you on board because you have experience in in system thinking, you have experience in transformation, you have experience in project management. Let's break it down really onto an operational. Let's use this example from Switzerland, this wonderful team that's doing some great work. And you have some experience because you've developed some apps as well for project management. Where are some of the, can you name some use cases or some examples of how AI works and can accelerate the project management process on a day-to-day basis?
Okay, so now we're speaking specifically about project management.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I mean, there's plenty. You've mentioned a few yourself, right? You said, hey, in Claude, I put in my documents, I put in my files.
I create a project file.
And it does all sorts
and
of
it even speaks in the language of the documents you use.
Sure.
It uses names from the documents. Yeah. It's quite amazing.
It's fun. It's fun. It's a lot of fun, right? One of the different things that we're working on is this support structure for project managers, and one important aspect in it will be exactly stakeholder engagement, right? So help me deal with difficult stakeholders. And it's amazing, right? It just as you say, you put in, this guy's doing that and that guy's doing that and whatever. And the system is able to come up with quite some interesting.
If you feed it with the data,
right. Yeah.
It can give you a stakeholder analysis, a risk analysis. It can fill out your charter.
It can also help you, for example, evaluate things from different points of view. One thing that as human beings we struggle with, right? Yeah. We see the vendor is late, because he doesn't prioritize me, or the customer is upset, because he hates my project. So what very often we have as individuals is that we jump to conclusions. And certainly these tools can help you, can support you in saying, hey, wait a minute, relax. Did you consider this? Did you consider that? Right? Did you see it from that person's perspective, from that other perspective? And I think that this is definitely something that can enhance our human skills rather than set them back.
Let's give that function a name. I call it coaching. Sure. I'm actually amazed, and this it's not just Claude. You have it in OpenAI as well. I think OpenAI is faster than Claude, but Claude makes prettier pictures. But I'm amazed. I actually, some of it is wishful thinking, but I love the fact that if I have a long, good prompting and response session, that it says, well, would you like me to evaluate this, or you can actually ask it, just like you said, in the communication. How's the tone of this? Is this appropriate? What would you recommend? What are some of the options? I think the coaching factor is something that I think a lot of junior project managers wish for a mentor who would give them experience, And if you upload a PDF with a project management standard, you can ask it to coach me based on that standard,
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, this what I was mentioning to you, this tool that we're working on is exactly that. It's a coach for project managers that helps you run your projects, but at the same time, the objective is not getting your outcome. The objective is getting you to become a better project manager. Yeah. And for example, to learn that strategic thinking that we were talking about earlier, right? To look at things more holistically rather than just piecemeal. Yeah. And this is something that, hey, we are not good at as human beings. We are not good at looking at things holistically. We know that we should, but it's just a lot of hard work.
Too many data points.
Right. So why not have some help? Yeah. Right? And in this, and this is, I think, extremely powerful for us. So it reduces risks in a project, for example. It automatically creates a context which is more certain. Yeah. And in project context where uncertainty, ambiguity, all sorts of risks are growing and growing, we badly need something that keeps things a little bit more streamlined. Yeah.
You saying risk is the third segue to this topic. So let's open up these can of worms, because I think it's a substantial issue, and I think very few companies know the know the full extent of what potential risks they are engaging by letting the frontier be the Wild West on a grassroots level. Let's address maybe a short checklist of some of the things that companies need to think about, maybe even if they don't have a solution for it right away. What are the things we have to watch out for on the AI frontier so that it doesn't become the wild, wild west and everybody does what the hell he wants, and we inadvertently push buttons that create serious liability, danger to life and health, or financial disaster?
Sure.
What are some of those things that one has to look out for as a decision maker?
Well, so we are talking about risks that exist with current systems that are commercial systems, so systems that are on the market and that we are working with today. We're not talking about whatever AGI or anything else, because there the risks are a completely different story. So that's a much broader discussion.
Yeah.
So if you are a company who is trying to deploy today AI-based solutions into the ground, the grassroots level of your organization, what type of risks do you encounter? And these come in many, many different flavors. First of all, what tools are you using, right? So are these open source tools? Are these tools that you are purchasing an access to?
You have a private license or a company license?
For example, yeah. And do you have security over the data that you're putting in there? How are you managing this data? So from the perspective really of the sovereignty over your own data, that is the first very important big question. So for example, if you're letting your project managers use Claude, right? Or ChatGPT or whatever.
Yeah, or whatever,
so
Perplexity and all the other different names, yeah.
What happens with the information you're putting on there, right? You are loading your own information, you're loading your customers' information, you're loading contracts onto that platform, you're loading vendor agreements onto that platform, you're loading stakeholder assessments, maybe with personal information about specific people. Freddie is an asshole, whatever, right? So I mean, you're putting
even if you put a request for proposal on there with the personal information of another company,
the actual emails and the actual telephone numbers, for sure, absolutely, right? So there's a lot of stuff that you're loading onto there, and you're essentially letting go of control over that. Now, this is something that is not complicated to fix, but it needs to be done. Right?
Pray tell. How?
You need to do it in advance. So there are different ways. First of all, of course, legally, you can have a contract with whoever it is that is managing your cloud, just like you have with any cloud provider. But then you can also do it in-house. Yeah. If you're a big enough company and you have your own servers, you can have your solutions in-house and only go out when you have a specific query. And there are systems that you can put in place in order to make sure that the sensitive information does not go out, right? But it goes out only in a blocked format.
So you can create a constellation with the big players, with the big LLMs, where you can create, I don't know what the correct word is, a firewall, a security wall, where you can use those LLMs and get your benefits out of it without it being accessible from outside?
So first of all, you don't always need to. There are a lot of LLMs that you can run locally, which are not as powerful, right? But they do already a huge chunk of work.
Okay.
However, your question was very specific. But what if I want to go out and use whatever, GPT 5.0 or whatever? Yes, you can still do that. But what you need is a layer in between, behind your firewall, that identifies the sensitive information and redacts it. The information goes out, it comes back, and it's translated back to...
Is that an AI application?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Of course, but it's
where it takes out names and
it takes out names, it takes out telephone numbers, it takes out email addresses, it takes out whatever you tell it to take.
confidential information.
Right.
Yeah.
So the customer names, right? You define, screen the document for A, B, C, and D, substitute it with a stash of letters, and go out. And then when it comes back in again, the answers come back in, resubstitute.
But this would be an example of the middle management responsibility to say, okay, this is the upper management wants it, the operation wants to use it, but we need to make sure that we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's and creating a framework that works, that we're not getting liability.
Yeah. By the way, you don't necessarily need to go out. You can even go out only for specific.
Like I said, I'm not super proficient in the depth of AI, but a stupid question that I keep asking myself, okay, everybody's talking about these LLMs and it seems like they're unavoidable. They're kind of the backbone of everything. Everything's kind of interlinked and they kind of feed off each other, these different, and a lot of AI apps use elements of already existing AI to even function. My stupid question that I keep asking, because that's my skills, is to ask the stupid questions, but they're sometimes not that stupid. Couldn't an organization create, and I think I asked you in the last podcast that we did, couldn't a company make its own LLM?
Theoretically, yeah, it'd be super expensive.
Or could you make? Is there a possibility to use an existing LLM, a derivative of an existing element that's more secure for what you're using?
Sure.
Okay.
And you can, I mean, there are LLMs that you can use remote, that you can use on your own servers. Llama is just the oldest example.
Okay. What about Copilot?
And they are getting a lot better. Yeah. They are quickly getting better. So soon we're going to have models that you can download onto your phone and use them from there.
Yeah. What about Copilot? Because Copilot is an interesting constellation. I think the reputation from what I've picked up is that Copilot is functionally not as advanced as some of the other AI tools, but one of the benefits of Copilot is that it's
integrated with Microsoft
integrated.
Office. Yeah.
Well, not only if that's your landscape within your company, then it's a lot easier to use Copilot to create things because it's a closed system within your company. Is that true?
I am not an expert in Copilot.
Okay.
I don't know. I would assume that it also needs to reach out to an LLM, but I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Good. What other key issues do you see that we have to look out for?
Well, this is only relating to data that is going out. This is a very partial little topic that we touched on. There's all the risks that relate to people using the tools. So what I was talking about was, but the project managers learn to become more strategic thinkers and systems thinking and holistic and all this. Yeah, that's nice. That's fancy.
Yeah.
But the truth is that when you just give these tools to people, they don't become holistic. They become, oh, cool, now I can only work 10 minutes. And what you get is a reduction in value of so you get used to the fact that whatever you're producing in 5 minutes looks good, done, I'm finished. And that is exactly the contrary of what you want to obtain, right? So making sure that when you introduce these, you don't create a kind of saturation, but you create a search for more, right? So expectations need to change. Leadership needs to change.
I'm hearing you say something that leads in, that's attached to this other topic. There's actually a term for it. I can't remember what the term is, but there's actually a modern term for what happens to the frontal lobe. I think it's a form of dementia, they call it. I think it's social media dementia or something, but I'm sure it can apply to AI as well. There's all sorts of studies out there that show, although AI is, and this is a risk as well, it might not be one of these classical cyber or security risks, but it's a risk for humanity and also, I think, for the quality of your employees. I think that one of the advantages of, you mentioned beforehand, if you're a little bit older, it's sometimes a challenge to embrace new technologies. But I think one of the advantages for those who are older and are still have the willingness and the youthful mindset to learn something new is that it's a lot easier for us to identify slop or Or say that's a nice attempt, but no cigar. So if anybody's wondering what the heck happened, Max is back with a vest. It's hot as heck outside, but we're in an old ranch house, farmhouse, so it's cold in here. So we left off with my basic question yes, AI is an augmentation of intelligence, but is there a danger for upcoming generations? You know, it used to be that we learned through trial and error, and that prolonged experience created an in-depth understanding, a cognitive process, and now young people, nothing against young people, can just ask the question and they get the answer, but they don't have the wealth of experience to know, is this the right answer? And to personally absorb it and cognitively question it. Yeah. Do you think that's a danger?
So the danger of ending up with lazy minds. Yeah. I think that A, yes, this is a danger. B, not in the way that we usually think. Mm-hmm. It's a danger, and by the way, it's not a danger only for young minds. It's a danger also for older minds, right? It's very easy to give up learning to think, right, or give up thinking. So yes, it is a danger, and I am not sure. Maybe the research that you were referring to earlier has measured this, but I think it's actually measurable.
Yeah.
So it's not a maybe thing that maybe this will happen. It's already happening. Now, yes, this is an issue. Of course, it's an issue. But I think it's an issue when we talk about this, we often say this is going to become a problem because young people never learn to think, never learn to take decisions, will not be able to distinguish between good and bad or between a well done work, properly done work and another one. I think that the way in which we work is going to change. Okay. And therefore, what it means to put effort into the work is going to change. Mm-hmm. So it's not that now we are in a transition phase in which we already have some results, and those results are quickly obtainable, at least in form, at a high level through AI. And so you're down here, instead of going all the way up yourself, you just jump up to the top. But as we learn to apply AI into our processes, the processes themselves are going to change. And so the expectation within these processes is going to change. Therefore, it's not going to be enough anymore that you got there. You're going to be doing this cycle iteratively in order to bring it to where you actually want it. And that's where the learning process is going to happen. So maybe I'm more optimistic than many others, but what I feel is that we are in a transition phase, and what looks like an easy environment in which we can just rest and forget about learning to think is actually just because with a more powerful tool, we're trying to get to the same place. Instead, when with this more powerful tool, we want to get to where that tool is actually supposed to bring us, at that point, we will need to put work into it. Okay.
You're jumping ahead, which I love. It shows that you're a quick thinker. I'd like to get some other thoughts on the future, but before we get to that topic, which we'll close out with, we talked a little bit about the risks. They're substantial, right? But they're not risks that are new. We had the same conversation with cybersecurity when everybody went cloud. Right. And I said, well, where's the security, right? Yeah. I think the other thing, there's another study out there that shows that AI is so good at assessing existing software of systems that they've identified, I think, 100-fold or 500-fold more vulnerabilities in existing systems that we've overlooked for a long, long time, which exposes it. That's another form of risk. But that's not the rabbit hole I want to go down with. I might be a little bit old school what this is concerned. I have this belief system of noblesse oblige, the French term for if you are in a position of authority and power, you have a responsibility. You're a servant leader. Okay. That's kind of my entry into this next question.
The Superman thing, high power brings high
something
like that.
Exactly. And you're not given power because you're special. You're special because you use power to serve, right? The governance issue, right? I think all of these cybersecurity issues. How do we look out for the culture of our organization? How do we look out for sustainability, or are we just throwing that out the window? We haven't even talked about the energy aspect of it and all that kind of stuff, and the hidden cost aspect, which I think is going to evolve as well. Right now, it's cheap because it's being financed by us taxpayers and the government, but eventually we're going to have to pay for all this. Okay, and there's all sorts of statistics that say, I don't know, every time you draw a doodle, I don't know how many trees in the Amazon die or something like that. I don't know what it is, but I don't want to make fun of it. But I'm having a little humor here, right? Absolutely. But the question about governance, the question I would have, and I would emotionally assume that in a difficult time where we don't know what the hell we're doing, it's still the job of upper management to say, governments also to say, we see the potential, we embrace it, but there are certain rules. And I think there's also an ongoing battle over laws, rules, and governance, whether it be internal or external. What is your feeling about the governance? Is it something that we need? Is it something that senior management needs to get a handle on? Or does that just slow us down? Does it just interfere with us? Is the transformation of AI so dynamic that whatever governance rules we create can't keep pace with it? What's your take on that?
Okay, so we're talking about different things here. First of all, yes, absolutely, we need to have a well-structured governance of AI. However, when we talk about governance AI, especially when we talk about regulations, the focus is the big players. The focus is the OpenAIs, the Anthropics,
the Bond villains.
Those who are actually creating the LLMs. Or
taking ketamine and going on the integrated.
Absolutely, yeah. What we've talked about so far was either companies who are trying to utilize tools that utilize those LLMs, or the companies that create these tools that utilize the LLMs. These are at a different level, right? So when we talk about regulation and all the risks that there are, and so we're really talking about regulating the big players. So do I think that is important? Yes, absolutely, it's fundamental.
And would you recommend, since this is new for a lot of companies, that they get external help for this?
To make sure that...
to create a framework of what questions do we need to ask, what risks do we need to take to formulate governance. Not that they just take their vision, their AI vision, and put it into one of the open AIs and say, give me a governance.
Yeah, exactly.
Although that might work.
So if you're looking at, let's say a company, I'm in the education environment, right? So we create tools for education. Nice. There needs to be a sense of responsibility which says, hey, if you are building a tool that is going to influence people in their education, in the development of their skills, you need to have a certain set of attentions that you're paying. Because what if I create a tool that helps you with your PMP certification, but if you're black, it tells you, nah, you're not ready, right? Or if
you're applying for a job and you're over 58, the system automatically kicks you out, which, by the way, is a fact. It's been proven.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, or it tells you, no, don't get your PMP.
It doesn't tell you.
You're 58 already.
But it tells the HR people that kicks them out, pre-selects for them.
Yeah, but that really exists.
Yeah.
The example I am making luckily doesn't exist.
I hope not.
Yeah. But it could, right? I mean, if you just leave it to the AI and you feed the AI a bunch of data which says, this is how much the PMP costs, this is the investment it goes into. Of course, the AI might reach the conclusion that, hey, guess what? If you're 60, why do you get your PMP? You're only going to use it for 5 years. It's not worth it. Yeah. right? So clearly this needs to be addressed.
Now you say yes, laws and governance are something for the big players, but don't you also think that on a lesser level, even small and medium-sized companies need to have a basic framework of governance?
The type that we're just talking about now, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, good. You alluded to future. I asked Helen when she was on the podcast where she sees us in the life cycle, and I was kind of shocked by the answer, because she addressed that AI has been around since the 50s, which is true.
In the life cycle of AI?
Of life, if we see AI as a technology, where is it in its life cycle, right? And some people say, well, if it's been around since the 50s, it must be like really mature. And she says, no, we're like in the children's shoes.
Sure.
There's so many bugs, there's so many things that still need to fix. It really has exponential potential.
I hope so.
What are some of the future aspects that you look forward to, or that you foresee, and maybe that you're even working on? Maybe you can give us a little bit of insight on what you're working on.
No, that's not the level at which I am working. So first of all, I'd like to just mention the current setup that we have already available today to us at relatively cheap prices has so much potential that let's start getting this right.
Let's eat that first.
Right. Yeah. So I can believe that there'll be a lot of cool stuff in the future. Absolutely. But right now there's a lot to do with what we have, and what we've had so far is a huge improvement on the technology itself, but very little improvement on the application of that technology. It's like if we had invented Formula One engines,
and we don't even
but
have
we
roads
still
yet.
put them onto the buggies and we don't have roads.
We don't
exactly.
have roads,
yeah. So all that still needs to develop. And at that point, we'll finally be at the level of using the technology that we currently have. Will there be future for other developments? Absolutely, of course there will be.
I really like your answer. I really like your answer, because I was anticipating you were going to like most people I talk to, they'll start talking, oh, it'll do this for you and it'll do that for you, and it was almost tedious answers. But if I were to repeat what you're saying, which I think is totally profound and a different perspective on it, let's eat and digest what we have first.
Right. Absolutely.
And if we do, we don't need 10,000 calories. We can be happy with a fragment of that. If we can eat and digest that, we'll stay healthy. We'll advance. Maybe also develop organically. Culture needs time to catch up with transformation technology as well. We'll
be ready for the next phase.
And maybe we'll also have, which I kind of picked up from Helen, I liked a lot, was the concept of, we all feel a little bit victim to AI. Maybe not in a negative way, but in the sense that, hey, we're not participating. We can't really determine where it's going. It's predictated. And what I really liked about her response was, no, we have a say.
Absolutely.
We have a say. If we claim our self-determination, companies, say, listen, AI's got some potential. Let's design where it's going to go, which is basically also what you're saying, right?
If we don't do that, the bookkeepers will win. Yeah. If we don't do that, the cheapest possible solution is going. At that point, for sure, you're going to have the job losses, all the stuff which is the ideal solution, the one that actually brings real value, is not that. So, but we need to participate. We need to be part of the transformation. Yeah.
Let me look at my crew. They're alive and awake. Do you guys have any questions for Max? It's been a while since we've had the opportunity to tie you guys in, but we like to do that. Any questions?
What do you think is going to happen in the next 2 to 3 years with companies and AI? In the best case and in the worst case?
In the best case and in the worst case. I don't think that the best case and the worst case will happen. So that's point number one. What certainly I see already starting to materialize is that companies are going to, and I wish I could see you better.
Yeah, you're talking about
Okay. So what certainly I see that is already materializing is an attitude of curiosity. And that, I think, is definitely part of the best case, right? So where we
But that should happen.
That should happen.
Okay.
That should happen.
It's not part of the part you won't think happen. Yeah. Okay.
No. I see it already starting to happen, and a little bit. I mean, why are we having these conversations? Because there is curiosity in this, and so this curiosity can lead then to a more involved participation, which is exactly what we said we want, right? What I hope will not happen, what I think would instead be the leading to a very negative outcome, would be leaving this tool to purely the number crunchers. And there's a broader topic around this which I feel very strongly about, but it's maybe a little bit beyond which is the stability of democracy in our countries. This is the risk that if we do not take ownership of what is actually happening and we just delegate ownership to the natural flow of things, that we lift our hands, a little bit what you were saying earlier, we lift our hands and we say, oh, I don't have a role anyway. Yeah. The risk is that we don't do this only with AI. We do this with the context in which we live. Yeah. And that cannot go down well.
That is a dystopia, yeah. Max, thanks a lot. It's always a pleasure to have you on board. This is the second time we've had you on board. I've already got you scheduled for some other things. For those of you out there saying, who are these people that keep coming on? These are people that are close in my circle. These are experts that I respect. By the way, if you're interested in reaching out to Max and seeing what services he provides, you can see him on the PPM Academy website. He's on LinkedIn. You're available for work.
If it's interesting.
He has plenty of work, but he's available, as I am. Okay, Max, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. We will come back to you with some more AI later down the road. Thanks a lot.